The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Sunday, the 15th of February, 2026, and welcome to This Week. Well, it's not with Mary Holland this week, it's with Dr. Suzanne Humphries. I know our viewers are very excited that you're standing in this week for Mary.
They are very big shoes to fill, and Mary, please come home quickly.
She's got another couple of weeks. The first article is Zero Hedge. New York City joins World Health Organization's Global Outbreak Response Network after US exit. The New York City's health department said it has joined the World Health Organization Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network, becoming the latest Democratic-led jurisdiction to link up with the United Nations Coordinated Public Health System following President Trump's decision to withdraw the US from the World Health Organization. So it's California, Illinois, and now New York City joining. Dr. Humphries, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's very interesting to see who the rebellious little children are, and we know who they're going to be. And so going through this article, I thought there was interesting little comments here, like infectious diseases know no boundaries. Well, I think that's pretty rich, given that the Biden administration let in how many million illegals, and what do we know about boundaries? I also think it's pretty rich having Gavin Newsom talk about how reckless it was while he let California burn. So you see, they have their agendas and they do what they want to do.
But also, it's not going to affect us federally. HHS has already said that they can do whatever they like in a way. It's not going to affect us. We've still left. America has left the World Health Organization while these people are in.
Yeah, and that I think that's a really good thing if you understand how corrupt the World Health Organization has been for a very long time. I mean, I've been through this in a lot of my videos, and it became glaringly obvious during the COVID pandemic and all of the lies that we were told all over the world and the plans that were implemented. It was completely corrupt, and retrospectively, we can say that. And unfortunately, the damage is done.
Correct. Right, let's move on to measles. Well, first of all, we've got the Fonz, Henry Winkler, on X. He's getting a lot of heat for this. He tweeted, or whatever you want to call that thing, "For the sake of your child and the children around them, vaccinate. Measles does not have to be." Do you want to comment on that, or do you want to go on to Dr. Oz?
Oh, no, we've got to let the Fonz have a few comments. I want the Fonz to have a look at this graph. This comes out of Dissolving Illusions, and it shows the measles mortality rate in the United States. And then you see that arrow on the right-hand side where the measles vaccine came in. And so I'd just like to say that if you read a little bit about Henry Winkler, aka the Fonz, online, you'll see that he is anything but a scholar. He nearly failed out of every academic endeavor he ever took on, except for his acting. And I think maybe that he should leave public health up to us and stick to acting. Or who knows, maybe this is part of his acting role. Maybe he was scripted this. He probably doesn't remember measles in New York City when he was growing up in the 1940s. Because I would say that he would have had measles and he would have recovered from it. It would have been a total nothing burger. So I would prefer if the Fonz was telling people how easy it was to beat measles when he was a child. But if he had a little bit higher intellectual capacity, I would suggest that he reads the measles chapter in Dissolving Illusions. I'll send him a free book, and maybe he can even get the audiobook so he doesn't have to read it. He can just listen to it. But at least, Fonz, please just look at the graph and tell us, why you've got stuck into this issue, because we really need to know.
Well, I think I saw you commenting on that, Sped. He got so much abuse for writing that. People will listen to actors, but not to brilliant doctors like yourself.
I think that was my comment. Now I forgot about it already. This guy, Alexander Langmuir, was considered the father of epidemiology, infectious disease of the time. And he was asked how serious a problem measles was before the vaccine was available. And he talked about how it was a self-limiting infection of short duration, moderate severity, low fatality, maintained stability over the centuries. And he was asked why he wanted to eradicate it. And he said, because it's there and it can be done. It wasn't because people are dying left, right, and center. And so this was a guy who had some intellectual capacity, who was a doctor, here. And this was his comment. This is actually a slide that Roman and I designed after we looked at the patterns of what's happened since the vaccine has come into the scene. And I hope the Fonz will listen to this as well, because what we see on the left side with the blue, like this is the ideal. So the babies are born, and then when they're around 2 years old, they get measles, and then they go on to be naturally immune. And so all that blue sky section there, that's the real herd that's really providing the immunity. Like the Fonz, he's really providing immunity. Like Oz is probably really providing herd immunity because they probably had natural measles. Like you, Polly, you had natural measles. You are the people that are really protecting the herd right now. Now you move into the whole vaccine era, and you see what starts to happen is that those young babies have become susceptible in the red at the bottom, and you see that the elderly people, after the vaccine has worn off, have become susceptible, and the vaccinated are now susceptible because the vaccine has breakthrough problems. And this is why when they gather the statistics, they tell us that it's unknown or unvaccinated, and they stop testing for strains by and large, because they don't want to tell us if it was a vaccine strain or a wild strain or perhaps a mutant strain that has escaped the vaccine pressure. So it's always more complicated than these talking heads and these actors want to tell us. And it's incredibly frustrating to have done the amount of work that I've done and done the amount of research and given up the income that I've given up and sitting here with all this, so much information that I almost could start stuttering, and then to be told, shut up, you're an idiot by morons and slackers that haven't done their due diligence. So yeah, that's where that comment actually was coming from. And then, okay, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about the Fonz right now.
All right, well, let's move on to Dr. Oz and CNN. Dr.
Yes.
Oz reacts to skyrocketing measles cases across the US. Take the vaccine, please. An example of illness you should get vaccinated from. We have a little clip. Let's play that clip so you can all see him saying it for himself.
Speaking of transparency, I do want to, before I let you go, ask you about a record surge in measles in the United States. South Carolina, for example, is currently reporting 800 cases. It's the worst outbreak since measles was declared eradicated more than 3 decades ago. Is this a consequence of the administration undermining support or advocacy for measles and other vaccines?
I don't believe so. We've advocated for measles vaccines all along. Secretary Kennedy's been at the very front of this movement.
Come on.
No, he is. When the first outbreak happened in Texas, he said, get your vaccines for measles because that's an example of an ailment that you should get vaccinated against. What happened with the core schedule that was released in the beginning of last month was to say, listen, we look at what happened in Europe. In Europe, if you give people 80 different vaccine doses to take, people start.
But I'm specifically talking about measles here. I mean, you talked about RFK Jr., the group Children's Health Defense that he founded and ran up until 3 years ago, posted on X, despite the media's scare tactics, there's no reason to fear measles. Should people fear measles?
Oh, for sure. And we actually are pretty aggressive at CMS. We fund any vaccine you want to take. There will never be a barrier to Americans get access to the measles vaccine. And,
as a doctor, your message to people about the measles vaccine is?
Take the vaccine, please. We have a solution for a problem. Not all illnesses are equally dangerous, and not all people are equally susceptible to those illnesses. But measles is one you should get your vaccine.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, thank you so much for being here.
Well, do you want to tell that to Billy Tommey, who took the vaccine and is now screwed for life? I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
Right, tell that to Billy. I'd love to hear that. The CNN anchor did what we expect in that she had to rubbish Robert Kennedy. And so at least Dr. Oz, tried to say something positive about Dr. Kennedy. But the first thing she said was that it's record breaking. Well, this is the same as when they tell us that we have record breaking temperatures and climate change. And then we look in the 1940s and we see higher temperatures in that particular area. So take a look at this slide and you can find this data pretty much anywhere. And you can see that back when I was in university and medical school and heard nothing about measles, we had 27,000 cases one year. Okay. So my question to the CNN anchor is, what is the record here? Exactly. Because even compared to last year, we haven't hit a record. Like maybe this year we'll have a few higher cases of measles. Maybe people are actually more on the lookout for it. Maybe doctors are finally learning how to diagnose it, because for years after the vaccine came out, doctors had no clue about how to diagnose measles. But now it's hitting all the outlets, and doctors are going to be getting educated about the non-vaxxers, and so they have to start diagnosing measles. So I do think that there's going to be some bias in that as well. I think some of what we're seeing are vaccine-mediated cases. We know that. Some of them might be true cases because parents are backing away from measles vaccines and children are being intentionally exposed to measles so that they can get full lifelong immunity. Again, measles is a very complicated story. And it's not just about, we don't want the disease. It's about what could possibly be the downside of the vaccine? How effective is the vaccine? And are we going to have choice? Are we going to trust our vaccines and stop yelling at everybody else to get vaccinated so that everyone else can be safe? What we can see are the total cases to date and full year of 2025. And we have a long way to go before we're going to break a record there. But I want to bring your attention to how do you age unknown? We don't know the ages in a certain percentage of them. But look at the unvaccinated or unknown, 95% or 93%. So I would say that I would request that Robert Kennedy Jr. might want to send somebody on this task to try to delineate who is vaccinated and who is unknown, because I just can't imagine that it's that difficult to figure that out. And compared to the 1980s and 1990s, this is an absolute nothing burger. We need to keep the facts on the table, and we need to get good research going in terms of vaccinated, unvaccinated people, which hasn't been done in terms of the measles. We know there's huge downsides to the measles vaccine, and we have to be very careful about it, as opposed to the measles infection, when it's treated properly and not treated by people who have no idea what it is or how to treat it. Outcomes are fantastic, and it leads to lifelong immunity that really protects the herd, really protects young babies, really gives expectant mothers solid, durable immunity that they can pass on to their babies as well.
And don't go to hospital if you've got measles, if you can help it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was the other thing, is they're banging on about the 3 deaths that occurred last year. Well, we know we had the medical records from 2 of them, and they were, it's a big leap to say that they died from measles, just put it that way.
Well, now this is fun. This is HealthBot on X. Terminator director, this is James Cameron, says he no longer wants to live around unvaccinated Americans and has permanently moved to New Zealand. Cameron says New Zealanders are sane with their 98% vaccination rate, while the US is a country falling behind as more Americans reject science. So off you trot then, James Cameron.
Yeah, right. Well, as many people know, that I spend a lot of time in New Zealand. I was actually in New Zealand during the lockdown period. And so I've got a pretty good hold on what happened here. And there was an exceptionally high vaccine uptake rate initially. It has since fallen. And there are tens of thousands of very angry New Zealanders who did what they were told to protect other people and ended up either crippled or worse. So I think he's in for a bit of a surprise. This is really interesting to me because, I've seen the film Avatar, and the first time I saw it many years ago, the very first film, I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet and cute. And now the more I think about it, like, this dude is clearly a transhumanist. Like, Avatar is a transhumanist idea here. This is a guy that's not going to be bothered by terrible things that are happening to people because of vaccines. He's probably a guy who's in the big club with Gates and everybody else. So, I wouldn't take anything he has to say any more than I would with the Fonz, the difference being that James Cameron's IQ is probably a lot higher. I'd also like to point James Cameron in the direction of a gentleman named Barry Young, who is a whistleblower in New Zealand. And you'll see he's all over the news in terms of a data leak that occurred. He was a data guy. And he saw some alarming patterns in the database of deaths after COVID vaccines were administered. And he released the data, completely redacted, no names, but he's actually been thrown in jail. He's on trial now. And, we consider him a hero because he's basically facing all kinds of hate and death threats and been thrown in jail. And he's still standing strong, saying that this is a pattern that we saw and somebody needs to investigate the pattern rather than looking at me, the guy who tried to wake up New Zealand and show that there was an excess death rate. Nobody wants to, if you look at all of the news articles that are in the major outlets, nobody's talking about the increase in death rates. All they're talking about is the data leak and the breach that he did. So I really pray for Barry Young, and I wish him the best. And I think Steve Kirsch did several interviews with him that I would direct people to. So before you want to think New Zealand is some kind of enlightened place where we live in vaccine nirvana, to really think twice about that. James Cameron can move here and he'll have a lot of privilege. And if James Cameron gets sick, unlike the rest of us who have to deal with one of the worst medical systems I've ever endured or observed, he'll be able to get in a private jet and leave. But I can tell you that you do not want to have a vaccine adverse event or any kind of illness in this country. You will be very lucky if you are treated with compassion and with doctors who have really good heads on their shoulders. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but by and large, what I hear are stories that I just thought were fiction until my own patients would come to me and start telling me what was going on with them. And it's a really scary place to get sick. So stay well, James Cameron. That's my advice to you.
All right, Brenda Belletti in The Defender. Eat real food. Heavyweight great Mike Tyson goes viral with Super Bowl ad. Mike Tyson urges Americans to eat real food. And so in the short video, Tyson says his sister died at age 25 from obesity-related heart attack. He also described a period in his own life when he felt fat and nasty and weighed over 345 pounds. Something has to be done about processed foods in this country, Tyson says. Was that a good move or not a good move? Also, sorry, I just have to say, how much did that ad cost? Because I think Maha put that together, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Yeah. Well, I want to look on the bright side of this one because I've become a little bit of a fan of Mike Tyson. I know, he's got a bit of a sketchy history as well, but, who doesn't? I'm glad the Super Bowl had some good messaging for the good people that were watching. Good for Mike and good for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for reminding people about history and about food and the mental health relationship. And anyone who's ever recovered a child from vaccine injury or autism, like you and your husband, know that this is true. And, Kennedy said that his uncle, John F. Kennedy, when he was the president, that they didn't need to spend money on chronic disease. And today we're spending 4.3 trillion every year. And, you see the pictures of people on the beaches from the I'd say I only know the 1970s, but even before that, obesity really wasn't a problem, probably because there was more real food. People were getting outside more. They were getting sunlight. They weren't exposed to the kind of blue light and EMF that we are today. And life was different back then. And we do need attention to it, not just in food. We'll talk about the light later. And it is going to bankrupt us. He also said that it was spiritual warfare because processed foods have serious effects on mental health too, despite what the New York Times says, referring to a recent controversy over his comments linking schizophrenia to processed foods. So, I'm cheering Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on. Maha has its moles and warts, but I'm glad about this. I'm glad that Mike Tyson, because he has some influence and he has some real life experience and he's an athlete and he's getting up in years. He's looking pretty good. And, we need to eat more apples. Now, we're not going to talk about what they're coating the apples with or how careful we have to be while we're eating real food, because real food's getting even more difficult to encounter as everybody's learning. So grow your own food as much as you can, support your organic farmers markets, and try to get your home kill animals or, friends that are doing that, and support people that are doing pastured animals. So it's not just about eating what you might think is real food, because a lot of what you're going to be getting in the grocery might look like real meat or real fruit, but it's contaminated.
Right, good advice there. Michael Nevadakis in The Defender. The EU pressured social media giants to censor American speech. A US House of Representatives 160-page report accused EU government officials of forcing tech firms to apply EU speech laws, including Digital Services Act. This is content posted by the EU users, including Americans. Since 2020, officials conducted over 100 closed-door meetings with social media platforms in an attempt to get their cooperation in a plan to censor the global internet.
Right. Well, they pretty much have to do that, don't they? I mean, this is their desperate ploy. It says here in October 2025, as part of the House investigation, Jordan revealed that EU officials participated in a secret roundtable at Stanford University earlier that year. The roundtable was designed to encourage and facilitate censorship compliance with regulators from Australia, Brazil, the EU, and UK. And so Elon Musk is none too happy about this because apparently his office in France was raided in Paris. Another comment here says they're scared. This kind of reaction is really represented as a fear of loss of control. And I think that is really what's going on. It has to do with the pandemic and the truth that's coming out about COVID, the truth that was out about COVID in early years. And, you know, the EU, they don't have a constitution and free speech like we have in America. So while in America we can say these things and it'll be a little bit harder to dampen it down, although it is dampened down, they're going full out in the EU to try to stop free speech. And at the last page of this article, they talk about a couple of arrests that actually even happened. So some of the victims of European censorship, one of them is an Irish comedian, Graham Linehan, who was arrested at London's Heathrow Airport last year for posts on X critical of gender ideology. And he said people from all walks of life are being silenced. He called for new whistleblower protections for the digital age. And another person, Finnish member of parliament, who faced prosecution on hate speech charges for quoting the New Testament in a social media post. And the ACLU, unfortunately, seems to be in line with Europe. So yeah, free speech is an American thing, and we should be very happy to be in America and have that protection and protect that protection because it's under fire, and the EU doesn't have that. So they're going to do what they can to try to shut up the Americans.
So be careful when you land in England as well, if you're going to write.
Right.
This is Florida testing shows high levels of weed killer in popular bread brands. The Florida Health Department found glyphosate in 6 of 8 breads tested. Bread is a staple food for many Florida families. They should be able to consume it without worrying about toxins, says State Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo. Well, you might be horrified to see that some of those breads are probably what some of you have got on your kitchen table in your pantry.
Yeah, well, good for Joseph Ladapo. We love him, don't we? This article that I was shown, it just a little correction there is that it lists glyphosate as a pesticide. It's a herbicide. But yes, it's in organic bread. And I thought the funniest part was that I think one of them is called like Dan's Killer Bread or something like that.
No,
So yeah, it's definitely literally killer bread. You know, Polly, I don't think I need to tell you this because you pretty much taught me this, is that for the most part, like, especially if someone's overweight, like it might be a staple in your diet, but you don't need that staple. That staple, like I'm constantly trying to get people to get off bread. You know, I flipped the food pyramid a long time ago, as did you. And I would say that, you know, your best bet if you're going to have bread is to make it at home, make it sourdough, make sure there's lots of minerals in a good sourdough base. Do your best at getting some organic grains, because even with organic grains, there shouldn't be glyphosate. So where did the glyphosate come from? Does it come from one of the other ingredients? I can't answer that, but you're always better making things at home. And if you're overweight and you're trying to lose weight, or your kids are sedentary, like stop eating bread. It is a staple food. It's not an essential food for most people.
Quite right. Good advice. Iliad Biotechnologies snags $150 million Series B for whooping cough vaccine. The funding will help advance live attenuated intranasal pertussis vaccine BPZE1. It targets adults and adolescents. Target's the right word.
Yeah, targets is right. This is another really complicated one that's been very much oversimplified. And in the 10th anniversary edition of Dissolving Illusions, I wrote a lot about the intranasal vaccine development. And how did I know that? Because I'm a historian, and I know that from the 1940s that immunologists were sounding the warning that injecting a vaccine, the pertussis vaccine in particular, resulted in non-sterilizing vaccines, meaning the lung surface was still going to be affected. So they either ignored or didn't know about the immune systems in the mucosal, the airway that is facing out towards the world. And you know, there's now been very elaborate descriptions of that pretty much separate immune system that lines that area. But since the 1940s, the earliest article I could find was 1940, active immunization by the intranasal route. 1942, active immunization by the intranasal route. There's, I've got paper after paper, 1952. This has been tried for a long time. And then in 2006, there was an article that came out that first described this GMO vaccine that I'm going to talk about in a minute, the one that's in the article. So it took 20 years to bring it to human trials. Okay, so they genetically modified 3 different genes in this vaccine to make it less virulent. So it's a live bacterial vaccine that has been preserved after it's been GMO'd. We always have to start here because why do we care about whooping cough? We care about whooping cough because people used to die from it. And we care about whooping cough because it can be very hard on the lungs. And I know that some of your family members just recently experienced a very significant episode of whooping cough. And I also know that your family members were vaccinated for it. And that makes a big difference. So when people are vaccinated for whooping cough, you can have a very, very bad case of it like I had when I was 50 years old. Absolute nightmare. And I understand why people wanted to develop a vaccine for this illness. The problem is that there have been numerous issues with the vaccine ever since it began. But let's look at this graph from Dissolving Illusions where it shows us the death rates from 1900 to 1967, which was going down on a ski slope, a black diamond ski slope pretty much. And then the whooping cough vaccine came in. So the whooping cough vaccine had virtually nothing to do with the decline in death rate. And in fact, I could make a very strong argument for the fact that the whooping cough vaccine, the injectable one that we use today, has actually increased the virulence, the severity factors of that bacteria. It's very well documented in medical literature. It's very well documented in a very long chapter in Dissolving Illusions. This is a little bit of a diagram that comes out of a journal article, and we adapted this. We had to make our own drawing of this for Dissolving Illusions. But the long and the short of it is that back before the vaccine era, that older children would develop whooping cough. They would have a natural infection, which does sterilize the respiratory tract and does provide solid immunity, as has been recently demonstrated by Warfel's baboon studies. And then they would have natural recovery, and the adults would be exposed to the children, and they would be getting boosted. And then the pregnant mothers would have some immunity that they could pass on to the baby. And so babies were pretty much protected, just like with measles, the pre-vaccine era, babies were protected by the older people that had solid immunity, okay? Then we bring in this vaccine on the bottom part of the chart, and we have shifted the susceptibilities to the older people and to the babies as a result of vaccination for the same reason that it happened with the measles vaccine. But that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is that, and I've been over this a million times, and we could do a whole separate talk on this if you wanted, Polly, but there are so many reasons why the vaccine has caused the pertussis bacteria in the population to mutate and become more seriously problematic. So your family members, I suspect, were infected by one of these mutant strains. What happens when you make these vaccines is what they do is they change the proteins by using formaldehyde. And the change in that protein changes how your immune system responds to it. So it won't what we call fix complement. Complement is part of the immune cascade that punctures holes in bacteria and kills them. It actually makes you more tolerant in the sense that we have different kinds of immune globulins, IgG1 through IgG4. When you keep vaccinating with injectable vaccines, you set up a tolerance situation like allergy injections would do, and you increase that IgG4, meaning the more vaccines you take, the more susceptible you can become to the actual infection. So again, everything's inside out and backwards with this vaccine, and I could go on and on about the problems with the injectable vaccine. And so yes, we either need to stop it altogether, which would be my vote, and they've developed a mucosal vaccine because they know they can no longer get away by saying there's a surge in whooping cough because of the anti-vaxxers. It's not because of the anti-vaxxers. It's extremely well documented that fully vaccinated children, especially in their 10 to 12-year-old range, are the have the highest cases. And so those kids could be infecting the newborns. And you don't want a newborn to have whooping cough. I would say up to 2 months, you don't want a child to have whooping cough. It's very difficult. After 2 months, I'm pretty confident that I can get a breastfed baby with parents who are committed to get that child through that episode. So they've been talking about this intranasal vaccine because they have to make a move to do something in order to stem the damage that the injectable vaccine has done in terms of population. because we can no longer say that it's because of the anti-vaxxers. So this intranasal vaccine, it's a genetically modified vaccine. And we know that when mutations happen in the actual pertussis bacteria, because mutations have occurred as a result of the vaccine pressure that's been put upon it by the population, where virulence factors have gone away. And you would think that's a good thing, but taking the virulence factors away from that bacteria actually stops the immune system from responding and can lead to increased invasiveness of the bacteria. So, I think we have a long way to go before we can say, oh, we've got this wonderful bacteria that we have GMO'd with 3 different areas of its genetic code. And, we can put it up babies' noses and adults' noses and teenagers' noses, and they're going to get mucosal immunity, and it's going to be a very low profile in terms of side effects, and everything's going to be well again. We're not shifting over to an intranasal vaccine. That's what I want to be clear about. What they want to do is add the intranasal vaccine to the vaccine schedule. There's never been talk about stopping the injectables. What they want to do is give everybody who's had the injectables the intranasal vaccine. And I have gone through this in Dissolving Illusions with all the medical references to show you that once you're primed with an injectable vaccine, your immune system is going to respond that way. And while some of the 6 clinical trials and write-ups that have happened over this new vaccine have shown that it does decrease the colonization in the mucosal tract up to 2 months, they're not looking at anything long-term. The adverse events were actually pretty significant in both the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. They used what they called an inert placebo background substance, which is a sugar water, is basically what it is. But my question is, why would the sugar water be causing, I saw a lot of adverse events, headaches, myalgias, neuralgias after someone has snorted the placebo. So it happened more in the vaccine group. So before we're going to sail off into sunset and say we've got the solution, I'm saying, whoa, let's look at history again. Let's look at the bacterial behaviors when it has self-mutated. And let's not think that this is going to be the solution. In my opinion, the solution is that we just have to stop vaccinating, full stop. And if we are going to use an intranasal vaccine, to use it judiciously. So I'm not going to say never, never, never use it. If we can find that it's really safe, if we can find that it gives even some short-term immunity without long-term effects, and they're not looking at long-term effects, but if we can, then we could say, okay, we have a newborn baby that was exposed to this. If it's safe to give that newborn baby, okay, that's great. Then that might be a one-off use. But if they're going to use this intranasal vaccine, they're going to be giving dose after dose after dose to us forever and ever, in addition to the injectables. So we are just receptacles for their new product. It's not a switchover.
Brilliant. Dr. Humphries, how can people get Dissolving Illusions while you're there? Because it's still for sale. You can still get it. And everybody, it's the best education you can get.
The best place to go is dissolvingillusions.com, because you can see all the different translations. I think we're up to 10 different language translations, and you can read about the different places you can purchase. If you don't want to purchase from Amazon, we have some options. We have color books. We have signed books by us. Roman actually just recently wrote a novel called Tender Mercies, which is about smallpox. It's actually very good. And you can learn about his novel. You can learn about my autobiography there. So just go to dissolvingillusions.com.
And it's on audio. You can get it on audio.
Oh yeah, it's on Audible and it's also on Kindle. Yeah, you can get it both places. Yeah. I just want to get back to this nasal vaccine, because I just pulled up the because I was able to go into the supplemental materials and pull up, and so headache, fatigue was actually more prevalent in the placebo than the test group. Nobody's talking about that in these one-page articles where we have these wonderful solutions. Malaise, myalgia, arthralgia. So do we get arthralgias, malaise, and fatigue simply by snorting sugar water? If we do, we better be really careful about that. Stuffy nose and congestion, runny nose, sneezing, basically all the symptoms of having an initial case of whooping cough. I just think this is a disaster waiting to happen. I'm not in favor of it.
Suzanne Burdick in The Defender. Moderna COVID vaccine linked to higher risk of febrile seizures in children who receive Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine had statistically significant higher risk of having these seizures within a day of vaccination, according to a peer-reviewed study by the FDA. It's unclear if the FDA warned the public about the risk when the study was first published as a preprint. Well, I'm pretty sure they didn't, but anyway. That.
Yeah, this is a really interesting article by Suzanne Burdick, and they quoted Dr. Brian Hooker in here as well. I recommend that people go ahead and go read this. I just want to first say that I personally, and I don't have any scientific randomized controlled studies that can prove this, but I personally do not believe that a vaccine-induced febrile seizure is the same as an infection-induced febrile seizure for a couple of reasons. I think the physiology behind them is different because when we have an infection, we have the normal gated channels occurring in our immune systems in terms of the response that we have. When you're injecting a vaccine into a body, usually not just injecting one disease. So that body is now responding to several diseases in a very unphysiologic, unnatural way. I think the fevers can be much higher and prolonged I don't need to tell you this, do I, Polly? We're injecting adjuvants, lipid nanoparticles, DNA contaminants, and other vaccines. So I don't believe that a vaccinated febrile seizure is any better than an infection one. I think it's much worse. It's never good. And Brian Hooker talks about this, and I completely agree. It's never good to have a seizure. I mean, if you have a seizure, your brain is basically, short circuiting. It's a very violent thing to watch. It's very scary, as I know you know that as well, because you've seen it more than once. And yes, most of the time, if somebody has a febrile seizure, they'll go on and be okay, especially if it's from a natural infection. And this is my personal experience. Natural infection, children that are otherwise healthy have a febrile seizure because the brain senses the temperature going up too quick or coming down too quickly. They'll recover and they probably won't have seizure disorder. But it's not just about having seizure disorders long-term. It's about having brain damage long-term. So while seizures are very scary, brain damage, long-term brain damage is much scarier. So FDA funded this study. So they slowly and finally admitted there was a problem. And I wonder if maybe this was an attempt to take the fact off that the vaccine adverse event reporting system might have shown even more serious problems. Like, when they're willing to admit something like this, my skeptical mind always goes, if they're admitting this, there has to be a lot worse. There has to be something a lot worse than this going on. So if FDA can be trusted at all, I would think that, and I think it can be trusted now more than it could have been in, 2020 to 2024 and before. But a warning should have been put out 2 years ago when there was a preprint that was available and uploaded, and the warning should have been put out then. And I think it's also funny that the FDA did the study and then they gave it a disclaimer saying that they're not really taking responsibility for the opinions. It's never good to have seizures. It's especially not good to have them after vaccines. And I think it's good that FDA is looking into these things right now. And there's good that there are warnings going on as well. So great.
Good, excellent. All right, Michael Nevadakis again in the Defender. Epstein pitched JP Morgan Chase on plan to get Bill Gates more money for vaccines. In the years leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic, Bill Gates and key figures from the Gates Foundation regularly interacted with Jeffrey Epstein, discussing ways to finance and develop a global pandemic preparedness and vaccination network. According to the latest Epstein files, I don't think there's anyone there in that list that's got any qualifications to be doing any of that stuff in the first place.
This article by Nevradakis did a lot of quoting of a friend of ours named Sayar Jai. And he had a lot of good comments in here. And he talked about Epstein being functioning as a switchboard connecting hedge funds, central banks, billionaires, academic institutions, and global health initiatives. And that he helped develop the architecture for pandemic profiteering years before the pandemic. So we know that Epstein had all sorts of financial relationships, political relationships, more. And so, of course, he's going to be a great quilter and what has long been understood to be what I have talked about in the past as the delicate fabric. This slide is from talks that I've done in the past. And it is an article from 1997 from the journal Pediatrics, where the delicate relationships between academia, government, and industry all relied on each other to develop and promote vaccines. And since then, we've had more of these tabletop vaccines that have been conducted simulating reality where governments and institutions have to respond to all sorts of terrorist or biological assaults. And of course, you need lots of money to have these response. And the emphasis in these tabletop exercises is always on the narrative, the news, and the vaccine. That's always the bottom line. They're not talking about the funders or the profits or anything like that. It's always that. And so when Sayer talked about the Ebola exercises, when that began in 2014, I think these people have been drooling towards 2021 COVID, and they have lots more in their bag of tricks and many more funders that probably sit behind the scenes. So I think Epstein and Gates are the front men, and they're really easy to throw under the bus because they are who they are, horrible human beings. If they're even human, I don't know how much human they are anymore. But we've got people like Ralph Barrick and Tony Fauci. So Ralph Barrick is one of the chief engineers of probably the construction of the COVID entity in the laboratory, and he's been at it for decades, and we never hear about him. I think that since 2008, there's been a lot of regions that participate in these tabletop exercises and fear induction, when the real people that I think are the scariest are the ones behind the scenes, the Ralph Barricks, the Tony Fauci's, and the ones that are making the actual plans and entities and being entrusted with our health. Like, what are we going to say about Epstein? Like Epstein, Epstein and Gates together. Can you think of a better partnership? I mean, this was all. Epstein was involved in this actually after he was known to be a sex offender. So clearly, Epstein wields enormous power and is a really high functioning puppet for people that sit behind the scenes. It's a really good article, and I think people should definitely have a look at it.
Thank you for that. All right, APN News here. New study. Children spending 4+ hours a day on screens face up to 61% higher depression risk. New Nature portfolio study reveals that excessive screen time in children is associated with significantly detrimental mental health outcomes across several disorders: ADHD, anxiety, behavioral problems, and even depression. I think everybody pretty much knows that, and anyone with young kids can see that as well.
Absolutely. I know. I just don't know. It must be so difficult to raise children in this world, because if you don't want them to have screen time, you're going to have to live in a community where screen time isn't the norm, because otherwise your kids are going to hate you because they can't go on either your phone, which I see kids demanding. I want to go on your phone, because parents come to my office and the kids have to be entertained. So give me your phone. And some parents will be like, no, you've had enough screen time today. And then the kids will demand more screen time. So it's not, I don't think it's just about the screen time. It's like what's in the phone. It's also what the kids aren't getting. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. So excessive nighttime exposure to blue light from screens and artificial lighting is strongly linked to increased depression, anxiety, and sleep disruption by suppressing melatonin and disrupting the circadian rhythm. This is, if you just do a little search on AI, that's the answer that you're going to get. And so what's happening there is actually a really complex process that's still being described. And so the depression isn't just from the screen time. What happens when kids are looking at these screens, and I see sometimes babies are being, the older kids holding the phone in front of a baby to entertain it. That the blue light and the flicker and what's going on into the retina, the back of the eye, and all the signaling that goes on in the brain, and then the glandular system, is a setup for all sorts of health problems and can actually lead to permanent damage in the retina. And so when these signals occur, there are signals that increase your diabetes risk and also depression. But what you're actually getting also is way too much blue light and not enough red light. Where do we get ultraviolet light and red light? Outside, in nature. And that's what kids need, like when we were growing up. This is part of why it's not just about the bread and the food. It's also about the sunlight. Sunlight is a very powerful tool in maintaining our cellular health, and it's underestimated. So kids are now, here, have your screen time. I'm going to put you outside with your sunblock, your hat, and your sunglasses. That's like the worst thing you can do to a child. Children need to be outside, not in the peak sun if they're not dark skinned, without sunglasses, without sunblock, getting a tan, running around, exercising, eating whole food. And if they want to have a little bit of screen time once in a while, they're going to have to turn that blue light down there, or have people wearing the red light glasses, the red or orange glasses. But it's much more complicated than just screen time. There's a whole complex hormonal cascade that happens as a result of sitting and staring. And I see so many people that are doing everything right. They're eating well. They're really thoughtful about how they live their lives, but they're not going to bed on time. They're not getting up at the right time, and they're sitting in front of a screen all day, and they're wondering why they're fat, why they're sick, Well, there's your answer. And it was a real revelation to me while, I'm giving advice to people all the time and they're doing everything I advise and they're not moving as much as I thought they really should clinically. But you get them off of the screens, even adults. It's not just children, it's all
Right.
of us. But children's brains are developing. And so they're going to obviously be more susceptible to problems.
I can't tell you the amount of time I've seen parents walking along, pushing their stroller, they're not even looking where their baby's going with the stroller. And I talked about this on Financial Rebellion, but this one mother in the post office queue, I cannot tell you, the baby was desperately trying to get the attention of the mother, and mother just was on the phone, scrolling. Like, I'm not blaming these people. Like, it's an addiction, not just for kids, but for the parents too.
It's so addictive. And even for me, sometimes I'm like, I can sometimes feel like my phone's calling me, and I go, there's something wrong here. So I will intentionally put it on airplane mode, put it away, get it out of my life. So if people are trying to contact me, that's why you can't get me, because I now purposefully only go on the phone certain times of the day. And I had an experience in a hardware store recently. It was a cafe next to it. And there were two adult parents were sitting there, both on their phones, engrossed in their phones, and their child was probably about 8 years old sitting next to them, just kind of like this. Like, the child was depressed because it had nothing to do, no one to talk to, and its parents were obsessed with what was going on the phone in a cafe. Ugh, these phones. And now that Elon wants to help us all out by having us access them without even having a phone, we can have all that data. No, thank you. I don't want this. I want to go back to the 1970s, quite frankly.
So here's your nutbag tweet of the week. I'm not going to say this person's name, but let me read this out to you. And thank you to the person who sent it in to us. As an L&D nurse, it was up to me to inject the newborn. Even back then, over 30 years ago, we had patients that would refuse. I know that it is their right as parents to refuse, but as not only a nurse, but also a mother, I just could not send a baby home defenseless. I know what I did was not right, but I would inform the parents I was taking the baby to weigh him or her on a more precise scale and then take them to the nursery and inject them. Just had to do it. No baby was going to bleed out on my watch in spite of the parents' stupidness. They're talking about the vitamin K, I presume.
There's a bit of bias because when somebody does this, she'll probably have no consequence. I hope there is a consequence for it. Like, how dumb that she admits this. I mean, it's one thing to do it, it's another thing to go telling the whole world. But it's boldness as well. I mean, this is our, pink-haired lefty here who they get away with this. Whereas we have, we have some doctors who decide to inject a placebo because they have a similar idea, and they're basically put on a bed of nails. So as long as you're on the right side, I guess you can get away with crimes like this. And she even says, I know it's their right as parents to refuse. Well, if you know it's their right to refuse, well, who are you?
Well, she doesn't want anyone to bleed out on her watch because of vitamin K. Remember all that nonsense they say?
Yeah, well, it's really kind of weird to say bleed out because that's not what happens. Usually bleed in, not bleed out. But okay, well, I guess she has a clear conscience.
Yeah, it's disgraceful. And I hope something is done about that. And any other nurse that thinks it's okay to do that is not okay. The last article here is the Washington Post. The autism epidemic is a myth. Most new cases reflect mild or no significant impairment. Moderate and severe cases have declined. It's by Adam Omery, who's a psychologist, which, by the way, psychologists have absolutely no place in vaccine injury world at all. We don't want you, please go away. And then they bang on about overdiagnosis, and that's as far as I can be bothered to read. What about you?
Yeah, like I read this and I just thought, wow, who put him up to this? But let's look at the grain of truth that's in here, if we may, because I used to follow what Dr. Ed Yazbek, and I really got into the whole autism thing when I was first waking up to vaccines, and I realized that the studies are fraudulent that show that that there've even been studies that show that vaccines don't cause autism. I looked this up, and he's right in the sense that the diagnostic criteria have been broadened. And what I would like to see is that there's some stratification, like with every other disease, like even if you have prostate cancer, you're stratified into a Gleason score. And I would like to see autism actually ranked and stratified into severity levels, because then we can really have a look at that. But I don't know how we could go back in time and look at that. But I know that there are people that are really good with statistics and much brighter than I am in this department that could look at what kind of spending has been done, say, for severe disorders disorders? What kind of prescription drugs has there been a rise in prescription drugs? The problem is people like this will go, well, there's only a rise in prescription drugs because there's now, more acknowledgement of the problem. But when it comes to what we saw when we were traveling on the bus, Polly, like I was really startled. Like I've been a doctor for a long time now, and I did lots of pediatric rotations back in the, I guess the 1990s. And I didn't see the kind of stuff that I saw while we were traveling on the bus. I didn't see, adults in diapers that were uncontrollable by their parents, head banging and just really out of it, really, really out of it. I didn't see that in the early days. I never saw it in my neighborhood, in my own life. The first time I ever heard children screaming with autism, I was like, what is that? That would have been like the year 2000 when I moved up to Maine, and one of the neighbors had an autistic child. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like really serious. Like the kid was just like screaming, crying. The whole neighborhood could hear the child all the time. So I do think that while the criteria have been widened, I think that's maybe in part, if you want to, black pill me a little more, that maybe it's just so that they can have people like this saying that, it's only just increased recognition. I think we need to find a way where we can suss out the really seriously impaired people like Billy and people that are even worse than him, and put them in a category of their own, and look back in time and see what kind of diagnostic criteria there were and how that's been expanded or not. I think that would be really interesting. And I think social services and that kind of stuff would be another area that we could look at that. Maybe it's already been done. This is not my wheelhouse, but I think that the callous disregard of this particular reporter, or this particular doctor was pretty startling. I just don't know why he would have wanted to write this article in the first place.
I'm sure he was paid. I'm sure. I mean, you try getting an op-ed or any piece in the Washington Post, Dr. Suzanne. I'd love to see you try it. You're not going to. They're not going to accept you. But these people get paid and they write this stuff because they're fighting Bobby. They have to fight Bobby.
That's true. Yeah, I always forget that. Yeah, I really wouldn't want to be in his shoes, man. That you've got to have some really tough skin to be doing what he's doing right now.
Quite right. Well, Dr. Suzanne Humphries, it was fantastic having you on this week. Standing in for Mary Holland. You did a fantastic job. We are going to see you more on CHDTV. Very exciting. So we will be letting you know what the next program with Dr. Suzanne Humphries is going to be. Get your Dissolving Illusions. Go to dissolvingillusions.com. And thank you for being here.
You're welcome. And thank you for what you're doing.
Rob Williams, and we've got Paul Bean from Our Geoengineering Age. Both of you, if you could individually talk about what exactly you do and what Our Geoengineering Age even is.
What Our Geoengineering Age it really is a group of researchers like Rob Williams, who's here with us, environmental historian Rob Williams. We have J. Marvin Herndon, who's a nuclear geochemist who's been working on the subject for a number of years, and a public health pioneer, Mark Whiteside, down in Monroe County, Florida. And together, all of us, in some ways or another, have contributed to this research project into geoengineering and weather modification, and how that's affecting all living and breathing creatures on planet Earth. That, of course, includes human beings, but really all life forms, right down to the cellular level. And that's something that we have been discussing, looking into, testing, and sharing the information as much as possible.
The mission of OGA is to provide an evidence-based exploration of our Earth's most pressing yet underreported global environmental issue. And that is, of course, geoengineering, which might best be understood geoengineering as weather manipulation and climate modification. And geoengineering has a 100-year history, Polly, that has been mostly hidden from public view.
So I would say, and maybe I'm wrong here, but this is what I'm seeing, maybe amongst my people, most people understand that the skies are being sprayed. But the majority of those people, not in our movement, say it's for the good for us. It's for, they're getting rid of mosquitoes, or they wouldn't do anything to hurt us. How do you respond to that?
Great question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's kind of like the argument about vaccines being safe and effective and being useful, right? We had questions about that. We seemed like it was kind of being foisted upon us unknowingly from mysterious sources. Where is this coming from? For us to then realize, like, no, this is in fact not a good idea. It's not going to be useful. And maybe we should have, at the very least, an honest and open discussion about what's going on. One of the reasons why OGA was invited to speak in England about this subject, geoengineering and weather modification, is because their government has come out and said, like, hey, we're involved in some stratospheric aerosol injection projects to block out the sun. And the stated motive is to mitigate climate change and to cool the planet, to block the sun's rays, because, of course, that's totally going to solve all of our climate issues. But, like, that's the narrative that we're hearing. That's at least one of them. Another argument is that cloud seeding, specifically enhancing rain and precipitation overall, using silver iodide as an agent to do that. That's another, supposed climate solution, like a drought solution that we're hearing a lot about, particularly out west in states like Utah and Idaho, Colorado, where they are dealing with some drought issues. But what we here at OGA say is, a lot of the climate-related phenomena, climate-related issues, actually have something to do with a much larger geoengineering project, which is now kind of slowly being unveiled. But as it's being unveiled, we're being told that it's being used for other things, other, useful things. However, that's just not the case.
And and do we know what those useful things are?
Well, yeah, like, again, like mitigating climate change, right? So
Okay.
the argument that blocking out the sun to cool the earth, which is what is being done in England, like admitted in England, and we think it's being done elsewhere. But they're saying, like, hey, this is going to stop climate change, and if we can just do this everywhere throughout the entire planet, then the Earth's temperature will go down, which, of course, is nonsense.
Can I just say, okay, so over Christmas, I flew into Heathrow, London Heathrow, and as I was coming into land about 10 o'clock in the morning, the sun was beautiful, and I was like, this is amazing. But then we hit cloud, thick cloud, black. Then we landed in complete fog and no sun. Is that geoengineering?
London is one of the European epicenters of this activity, Polly, partly because of the way that weather travels, prevailing from west to east, in the same way that the west coast of the United States, California, Oregon, Washington State, are ground zero for a lot of these geoengineering experiments. Geoengineering is many things, to circle back, Polly, to your question of a moment ago. But think of geoengineering in three phases: pumping, jumping, and dumping. Pump, jump, and dump. Pumping is when nanoparticulate metals, synthetic polymers, other kinds of chemicals are placed into various levels of the atmosphere. We pump chemicals in. That's chemistry. Number two, the jumping is about physics, how we use electromagnetic energy to steer weather around once we ionize it with those chemicals. So pump, chemistry; jump, physics. Dumping is about all of the environmental consequences of these chemicals, synthetic polymers, coming down onto the earth, right? Streams, rivers, oceans, forests, soils, agricultural land, homes, living creatures. But the other thing about dumping, Polly, is this. This is a form of synthetic biological experimentation. And this is probably the hardest of the three for people to wrap their minds around. Geoengineering is about replacing nature, natural biology, with synthetic biology, what scientists call symbio, synthetic biology. So I'm going to say that one more time. Pumping is about the chemistry, air pollution, nanoparticulate metals. Jumping is about the physics. We use electromagnetic energy, waves, to steer weather. And the dumping is about replacing natural biology with synthetic biology. And historically, you can see in 30-year timeline increments from the 1930s, the rollout of first pumping, second jumping, and third dumping. So when you flew into Heathrow, Polly, and you had this beautiful sort of sunlit experience above the clouds, and then you flew through the clouds, right? Trademark, and you landed at Heathrow, what you were experiencing were not natural clouds or natural weather phenomena at all. You were experiencing pumping and jumping and dumping. You flew through a geoengineering experiment, to Paul's point, without public consent.
Okay, we're live. Right, tell everyone your name, please.
Hello, my name is Ana Espinosa Sanchez.
And this is a story about your beautiful sister. Look,
Yes.
everybody, look at her beautiful sister.
My sister Lupe Espinosa.
Look at her. I want everyone to see your beautiful sister. And it's just you two, isn't there? You don't have any
Yes.
other siblings.
I don't have any other siblings.
Okay, let's go back. Now, she's a mother as well.
Yes.
How many children she got?
She had 2 children, but one passed away when she was an infant. But she has, when she passed away, she had a 16-year-old boy, Mateo.
What year did this happen?
This happened in 2021.
Okay, had she taken the COVID shot?
No, she hadn't.
Why did she not take it?
We don't really believe in vaccines. My stepdaughter, when she was about 6 months old, received the MMR vaccine, and as a result, she started to convulse and had a really high fever, and ended up having a lot of seizures and went into the hospital. So now she is autistic. She is 30 years old. She knew that I wasn't in favor. I was a social worker for many years, County of Fresno, and through my time, I saw children who had been damaged by the vaccines. My son has very few vaccines. I told her that I wasn't going to give him any vaccines until he was at least 5 years old, and only the ones that were very necessary that I felt, which she agreed with. And then her son doesn't have any vaccines, and it was just something that was talked between us, because that's how we felt, that's how we believed.
So what happened what happened for her to go into hospital?
I didn't know she was sick, so she gave me a call and she said she wasn't feeling good and that she wanted to go to the hospital because she wasn't breathing. And I asked her if she thought she had COVID, and she said she didn't know, but she thought she might. And I said, what do you want to do? Do you want to call the ambulance, or what do you want to do? And she said she would call the ambulance. So the ambulance came and picked her up and took her to the hospital. So I wasn't able to see her before she went into the hospital.
Were you in communication with her via phone?
Yes, through Zoom, through phone. We were in contact sometimes, 3-4 times a day, but I wasn't able to go in and see her. She was in the hospital for close to 2 months. After about a few weeks into her illness, she wasn't getting better. So they gave her a round of remdesivir. Among other medications, we asked for vitamin D, and they wouldn't give her vitamin D. We asked for the monococcal, I can't remember what it's called.
But monoclonal antibodies.
Yes, the antibodies, before they gave her the remdesivir, and they refused to give it to her. It was just a battle from the minute that she went into the hospital. they asked her if she was vaccinated, and she said no. And she told me immediately that she felt the difference, the change in their demeanor, and they started to scold her. They started to treat her differently because she wasn't vaccinated. She was a few weeks into her illness when she got the first, course of the remdesivir. Yes. And she wasn't getting better. And then another week passed or something like that, and she still wasn't getting better. So they gave her a second course. And then she still wasn't getting better. And by this time she was, I believe, either intubated or close to being intubated, and they gave her a third course of remdesivir. So they ended up giving her 3 5-day courses, 15 courses of remdesivir. Along with fentanyl and a lot of other things that they were giving her.
Did they vent her?
Yes, they vented her. They vented her about 30 days after she went into the hospital. And she was ventilated for 30 days.
30 days ventilated?
Yes.
Oh, dear God.
She was, from the first day that she was ventilated, the hospital nurse called me and said, it's just easier if you just let her go. She was only ventilated for a few hours.
So you were her next of kin?
My parents, but I was on her paperwork.
Yeah.
So, and I said, absolutely not. I said, you're going to fight for her life. She's going to get through this. She's going to fight. She's going to live. And if you have to crack her ribs to keep her alive, then that's what you will do. So they understood that I was not going to let her die. At Clovis Community Hospital, their ICU is on the first floor. So they would only allow us to see her through the window. I wasn't allowed to go inside until like the last week and a half before she passed away. I would hear the doctors come out and tell their family members that were outside the windows, it's just better if you let them go naturally. And then soon enough I would see, a new patient in, because they would convince them that it was easier to just let them go. Because I would vent them for a little bit and then they're like, okay, well, they're not going to come out of this. Or I don't know what the reasoning was for that, but immediately they would come out and they would tell them, just let them go, just let them go. And I would see one after another, after another, after another. I was constantly calling the nurses and talking to the nurses. So my sister finally got accepted. I actually got in an argument with the nurse because I told her that I wanted to transfer my sister out. I asked her, is there anything else that you could do to help my sister at this hospital? And she said, no, there's nothing else that we could do to help her. I said, then I need her transferred out of this hospital. And her excuse was, there's more important people that need a transfer than your sister. And I said, I don't care what you think or what you feel. I want my sister transferred out of this hospital. So they worked on a transfer. Finally, they were able to transfer her out to Stanford University. Stanford called me. She'd been accepted for a double lung transplant. And they were going to come and take her. We just didn't know when. So basically, we were just waiting for that call. Stanford University came out, Life Flight came out, and my sister's oxygen levels were not stable enough. So they were unable to take her. And I have photos of Life Flight coming in. I had a friend who, she was a chaplain and happened to be there. So that's how she was able to give me step by step. They're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this, to try to get her to go. But she didn't make it. She wasn't able to go. Then a few days later, I got a call from the doctor telling me, okay, Stanford is still going to come out to get her, but we're going to give her a trach, and then we're going to give her a PEG, which is the feeding tube. And they were supposed to do it that day. And for some reason, they decided not to do it that day. They decided to do it the following day. So then I got a call the next morning telling me that my sister's health had deteriorated a lot. So they were not going to do the PEG. They were not going to do the trach on her. Basically, they were going to do the PEG and the trach because they were going to try to wake her up. And that was the reasoning, because she was doing better. But all of a sudden, her health just turned the following day. And then when we showed up, I knew something was wrong. I mean, I knew it because they had cranked up the air so high, and her air was stable the previous day and the day before that. And so finally I turned around and I was going to go out to talk to the doctor, but the chaplain, which was my friend, said what she saw it in my face. I said, I know she has a hole in her lung. They need to come and check. And sure enough, they came, they did x-rays, and there was air coming out of her lungs. So that's why they had cranked up the air so high, because she wasn't getting enough oxygen. And I said, this is something that they're the doctors. Why did I have to come in and diagnose my own sister? They're the doctors. They should have known what was going on. They should have done the x-ray. She was like that for a day and a half, almost a whole day. And then the following day, I went in there and I was very upset. I wanted a meeting with the doctors because this whole time I had been asking, for 2 months almost, I'd been asking for a meeting with the doctors, and they kept refusing to give me a meeting. Finally, that day they gave me a meeting, and I got into a shouting match with the doctors because basically they were telling me they brought in the palatable care without my knowledge, without my consent. And basically they said, well, you need to set a date because she's gone. And I said, I'm not setting no date with you. They called me a murderer. They said that if I did not choose a date, then...
Choose a date for her to be killed.
Yeah. And then they said, they told me it was against the law to allow her to stay living, basically. And they said that I was killing her by keeping her alive. So they literally told me it was against the law to keep her alive. I had a very good friend of mine who was my sister's ex-sister-in-law. She works for the medical system, and she was sitting next to me. And she'd been helping me advocate for myself because she couldn't really get into it because she worked for the hospital. But she would tell me, tell him this, tell him that, tell him this, tell him that. And that was the reason why my sister was able to stay alive for the 2 months. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened because I didn't know the hospital system. I don't know, I didn't know what words to use. I didn't know how to push them to keep her alive. In the end, her heart just stopped. And we called, that was the following day. The following day, she just, her heart just gave up.
Were you with her?
Yes. We slept, my parents, myself, and my sister's son. We slept outside of the hospital for like a week and a half straight in the cars. We would take turns going to her window. We were with her at the end when she passed away. We held her hand, we hugged her. When she passed away, she actually had a smile on her face because she knew she was going to be reunited with the Lord after all the suffering they had put her through. It wasn't her time to go.
Just remind everyone of her. Beautiful smile. How old was she?
She was 48 when she passed.
And where's her son now?
He lives with me. He's a senior in high school now. He's getting ready to graduate. It's been a struggle for him, for us. When she first passed away, the first thing that he told me, he asked me, he said, is my mom going to come back? Is Jesus going to bring her back like he did Lazarus? Is he going to raise her from the dead? Because he still had that hope that she wasn't gone, you know. He closed up a lot. And unfortunately now, he's going through the grieving process. It's been 2 years, and he's barely started to go through the grieving process. So
He's 18, right?
He just turned 18, yeah. And it's been hard on him because he says he misses his mom. He's getting ready to graduate, and his mom's not going to be there for his graduation, for his senior prom, for he got accepted into Fresno State University. She's not going to be there for those days, for those important dates. And he says she's not going to be there the day I get married. She's not going to be there, you know, the day I have children, you know, on Mother's Day. She's not there. He's like, well, what do I do? Like, I feel lost.
Yes. Now, did you get the medical records from your sister?
I did.
And did you discover a lot on this?
Yes. She has over 3,500 pages in medical records. I went in immediately the day she passed away. I asked for an autopsy. They refused it. But I went straight and I got her medical records because I didn't want them to change anything later on. And if they changed anything, I wanted there to be proof that they went back and they changed information from her medical records to cover up whatever they had. But she had over 3,500 pages in medical records.
And were you horrified by the amount of medication and
Yes,
fentanyl and-
yes. She had so much. They put so much stuff in her. I don't even know. To be honest with you, I don't even know everything that they put into her because it's just so much. It's just pages and pages. It was printed out, and there was like 3 books about this thick.
Did you get the COVID shot?
I did because I was forced to for my employer.
After your sister died?
No, before my sister passed away. Yes, I worked for a college. It was a private college, but they said that I needed to get it, otherwise I wouldn't be able to work.
Did you get Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer, Moderna?
No.
1 or 2 did you have?
2. It wasn't Johnson & Johnson.
Pfizer.
Pfizer.
And how are you feeling?
I am okay. I haven't had, I don't think, any reaction so far. But I don't know. I know my mom also got it. My dad also got it.
The shot?
Yes. And my mom last year suffered, it was very strange. It was almost like a mini stroke. But when she got to the hospital, they said she didn't have a stroke. She didn't have anything. She was in the hospital for like 3 days. And it was actually almost a year to the date of my sister's passing. We were going to celebrate a mass in her honor, and we had to cancel it because she got sick. She was in the car with me, and all of a sudden she just started talking gibberish, and I didn't know what she was saying. And I looked at her, and I pulled over, and I looked at her, and I said, "Mom, who am I?" And she couldn't tell me who I was. And so I immediately took her to the hospital. I mean, I was so terrified to take her to the hospital. So terrified. But I didn't want her to die. But at the same time, I was like, these are the people who killed my sister. So I struggled a lot. To take her.
And how was your mum treated? Because your mum was vaccinated. So
Yes.
From what we're hearing, from people sitting where you're sitting now, the vaccinated weren't treated like the unvaccinated.
Right. No, she was treated very well. And they let me stay in the room with her. And I stayed with her except for overnight. But I was there from in the morning all the way until it was time for me to leave. She was in the hospital for 3 days because they wanted to check up on her. They didn't find nothing wrong with her. Nothing. Which was, I was wondering, what happened? Like, why?
Well, from our experience, when there's nothing wrong, it's vaccine injury.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Is there anything else you want to say to the people?
My sister was a beautiful person.
We're going to put her picture on the bus.
Yes, she didn't deserve to die. Her son deserved a mom. But I know that she's in heaven with God now, and He's taking good care of her, and she's never going to be injured again.
Thank you for telling a story. I know it's
Thank you.
very hard. Thank you.